This morning, the Trump transition, his controversial cabinet choices, and did Russian hackers help him win the election? Plus, for the first time in years, the Feds increased the interest rate. What effect will that have on the economy and your pocket?
This is the Emmy Award-winning 11 News Close-Up with your host, Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. It's been 6 weeks since Donald Trump won the presidential election, chalking up 306 of the necessary 270 electoral votes. Now, though Hillary Clinton won the popular vote with more than 2 million voters favoring her over Trump, the Constitution mandates that it's the electoral votes that determine the winner. And tomorrow, members of the Electoral College assemble in each state to officially declare the outcome of the election. But there are a number of rogue electors who may challenge the outcome. All this as President-elect Trump continues to build his cabinet with some controversial nominees for top posts. So, how's Trump doing with his choices? And will they win confirmation by the Senate? And what are the chances of the Electoral College reversing the outcome of the election? To help us answer those questions and more, I'm pleased to welcome our panel of political experts. Jeannie Zaino is professor of political science at Iona College and a consultant at Applied Economics. Hank Scheinkopf is a Democratic strategist who has his own consulting firm, and Jonathan Greenspan is a Republican strategist. He's the managing director of public affairs at the Mercury Group. Welcome. Let's begin by talking Electoral College. What are the chances of them reversing that vote with about, 40 or 50 rogue members considering it?
I don't think there's any chance. I think he's going to be president on January 20th. I think this entire conversation is really just to add some catharsis to those people who still can't get over the fact that Trump is president. He will be president. The Electoral College will put him in. And again, we've spent a lot of time since Election Day talking about why Hillary Clinton wasn't elected. Some of her most fervent supporters are chalking it up to this, that, and the other thing. The Electoral College and those who are pursuing an attempt to sort of undo it, I think are doing it because it makes them feel good, but at the end of the day, he's going to be president on January 20th.
Any doubts, Hank?
Don't hock the house on the fact that he won't be the president. He's going to get sworn in. This is going to move forward. People should really calm down and look forward as opposed to trying to create chaos behind the scenes.
So they're going to make a lot of noise.
I don't know that the Electoral College is going to make much noise at all. Never in American history have they overturned an election. We've only had 87 faithless electors in all of American history. So you can bank on the fact they will select Donald Trump, even though a few have gone out and said they have reservations. 55
or so electors have called on the CIA to fill them in and give them a briefing on this whole hacking scandal we're hearing about Russia influencing the outcome of the election by hacking into Democratic and Republican files.
Yeah. This was led by Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who is an elector out of the state of California. So you have several Democratic electors who are asking for that briefing on the potential hacking by Russia. And they are citing the star of the moment, Alexander Hamilton, who said the reason to have the Electoral College was to make sure in the Federalist Papers that we didn't have outside foreign intervention in our elections. So they are using that as a way to say they should be briefed. Whether or not they're briefed, we don't know yet, but I don't think it's going to have much difference because you would need a number of Republican electors to come over to change anything substantively.
But that investigation is ongoing now. It's something that President Obama has called for in his final days in office.
We should separate the Electoral College from the hacking issue. John McCain and other Republican senators are going to be wild about this for quite some time. The Russian issue is not a simple one. It's very complicated. The new administration's picks for foreign policy areas seem to be and business areas seem to be much more reliable allies of or interests of the Russians than of the Chinese, our other strategic ally and antagonist in the world. And when you have the FBI and the CIA's turf challenged, which is what's going to happen if the hacking scandal continues, they're going to have to take action.
I agree with Hank. I think you have to separate the two. And look, more is going to come out about this hacking scandal. There was a very, very large, extensive article in the New York Times about this, including a revelation that apparently the FBI tried to make an attempt to warn the DNC that there was a potential for being hacking. Apparently, they got routed to some help desk in the computer room. So you have to separate the two. No one can say that Donald Trump won this election purely because of Russian interference or the allegations thereof.
Look, if Jonathan is exactly right. You can't blame Trump for this. But what will happen is that if this takes on a life of its own, you can guarantee in order for Trump to be successful and not have his own Republicans all over him, something's going to happen to the people engaged. If there's any evidence of criminality or malfeasance or inappropriate behavior whatsoever, it's just going to be that way.
And particularly John Podesta is at the top of this, was saying that he had been hacked during the campaign during the summer.
And we saw those releases throughout the campaign, and whether or not they had an enormous impact, we still don't know. But you heard Hillary Clinton and other top Democrats in Washington and elsewhere since the campaign saying that and the James Comey letter cost them the election. I don't believe that argument, but there is a sense among Democrats that this is a very, very important issue that should be looked into. That's why we see the call from President Obama. And as both Hank and Jonathan noticed, it's also Republicans calling on this as well, because if it happened, it's not going to stop with just this election.
Now, there was a report out just a day or two ago that Vladimir Putin himself may have a direct hand in this.
If that's the case, then you're going to see the FBI and the CIA go into action. You can't permit, those agencies are not going to permit, as any other agency of government would not permit, their turf to be so encroached upon, especially when they have the ability to take independent action, which means calling for prosecutorial interference and prosecutorial activity.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's move on to the Trump transition. Been 6 weeks since the election, a little over a month before the inauguration. He's assembling his key members of his administration. Let's talk about his cabinet choices. Let's begin with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson.
Yeah, Rex Tillerson. I mean, it is, we should say overall, it is not an incredibly diverse cabinet in terms of the top posts are all white males, and that's been noted repeatedly. It is a very wealthy cabinet, and it is a cabinet that is heavy in terms of military folks. And Rex Tillerson is one of those people that follows in line with what Donald Trump said he would do, which is he would not choose somebody from inside the Beltway, but he would choose somebody who he thinks is going to do his bidding and the administration's bidding and is a good deal maker. And so he's taken on Rex Tillerson, who has some pluses. I think the big question about Rex Tillerson is he going to be able to manage a department as big as the Department of State, as unwieldy, is very different from where he comes from at Exxon.
The big question is passing confirmation. There's a lot of concern about his warm ties to Russia and particularly to Vladimir Putin. What do you guys think?
Got to get through the Senate, Senate Foreign Affairs Committee before he gets to the floor of the Senate, which may not be such an easy escape. It depends. If the hacking scandal takes on more steam, then there'll be more view of him and his relationship to Putin.
Yeah, you already have 3 Republicans on record expressing concern: Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, obviously McCain. Look, if I'm the Republicans, I think they'll give a pass to most of the Trump cabinet. They may want to put all their chips down on Tillerson to try to give him a hard time. I still think he passes confirmation, but it's certainly not going to be
I don't think,
stamp.
not since 1989 has the Senate failed to confirm a president's choice.
Look, they're going to put him through the ringer, but I think they're ultimately going to confirm him. I just think that they want to be able to say that this was not a rubber stamp. I think they're going to try to let him sweat a little bit on the stand.
Now, it might be beneficial, would it not, for an outsider to be Secretary of State?
Deal making is important.
Would the benefit outweigh the baggage he may have?
The problem here is not, Jonathan's right, it's deal making, and yes, there is a benefit, but in the world system, the United States is positioned badly between the Russians and the Chinese. You can't have it both ways. The Obama administration decided that the move would be to the Far East, to Asia, and what the Trump people are doing is exactly what they said they would do, which is to change whatever Obama did. Now they're doing that. So you come up with a Tillerson, you come up with a Flynn, a national security advisor, you come up with all kinds of people who are more directed toward Russia. But the historical problem of the Republican Party has been anti-communism, and what Putin looks like is an old-style Russian communist dictator. Therefore, they're rankling at it, and they look at Tillerson and say, wait a second, you're bringing this guy in, and by the way, they hacked our election. Very complicated.
Complicated, but also bringing a businessman. He's bringing these wealthy businessmen into his administration. But that's not unprecedented, wasn't it?
James Baker
Kennedy,
had a few.
John Kennedy brought in Bob McNamara as a defense secretary.
And George Shultz, and who has served this nation with distinction. I mean, there are others. That's not the question. The question is really the foreign policy implications of it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we should say Donald Trump, he has said he would choose people who he has an affinity for and who will do his bidding and he has a relationship with and he thinks are good deal makers. And Tillerson fits all of those, even though they are, as we understand, new friends, so to speak.
Okay, there are some other controversial nominations. Let's take a break. We'll talk about that and why did Rudy Giuliani step aside? We'll probe that as Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. We're back with Jonathan Greenspun, Hank Scheinkoff, and Jeannie Zaino talking about the Trump transition. And we were talking about Secretary of State, his choice of Rex Tillerson. It looked for a while he was going to go with Mitt Romney. Why did he not go with him?
Why would anybody have thought that he was going to go with Mitt Romney? I mean, that's
all right. Let me interject.
I mean,
Roger Stone, who was one of his closest advisors, is quoted as saying, actually, Donald Trump was toying with him, wanted him to believe he would become Secretary of State just to, quote, torture him as retribution for his vilification of Trump during the campaign.
Not a Trump guy. Doesn't fit the Trump style. To be quite blunt, here's a guy who has to rely on Southern Protestants. Now, if you look at the numbers from the last presidential election about Mormonism and Southern Protestants in the context of that election, which come back is with a definite bias, and I don't think that Trump was going to take that risk under any circumstance.
He probably was toying him to some degree, but then again, if you're Mitt Romney and the president-elect gives you a call and says, I want you to come in and interview for Secretary of State, what are you supposed to say, no? You got to go in. Look, to me, where we crossed the weird mark was that dinner. And the picture that appeared online or in the Daily News of them having dinner. That to me is just said, okay, we've just achieved a level of freakiness to this
Jeannie,
that I've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think Mitt Romney shared many of his policy. I mean, if you look at it strictly from a policy perspective, they are diametrically opposed and have been throughout. So I found it hard to believe. And I think when Kellyanne Conway came out, it was a clear signal. She wasn't going rogue. She was actually doing the bidding of Trump. And that picture did seem to jump the shark, so to speak. And I think the writing was on the wall. I don't think many people believed Mitt Romney was seriously going to be named.
Okay, next question. Rudy Giuliani, he was in contention for Secretary of State too. He stepped aside, and the quote was, he didn't want to be a distraction. What do you think?
I don't really know what happened there. I think it's interesting that some of the earliest supporters in Rudy and Christie are walking away with nothing. Perhaps that's the way Rudy wanted it. I really don't know. But I find it quite remarkable that a guy who was really his trusted advisor, a guy he, by his own admission, spoke with Trump 5-6 times a day on the campaign, was out there on the Sunday talk shows, a huge surrogate, went on the road with him. It came up empty. I can't tell you why. I just find it very, very peculiar.
Do you think he walked away voluntarily, Frank?
I think he walked away voluntarily because he couldn't get what he wanted, and it's not good. It's not good character to not reward someone who was that loyal to you, worked that hard for you. I mean, it does not speak well of him. And if he knew he wasn't going to get it, I think Rudy Giuliani did the classic thing by leaving, so though people wouldn't look at Donald Trump as being completely disloyal.
There's a missing link in this explanation here, isn't there, Jeannie?
I mean, I just don't think we know yet. And I have to say, it is, you can ask questions about whether you should benefit a friend and somebody, an early supporter, but I also think is in keeping with Trump's style, where he takes no prisoners and he will look for the person that he thinks is going to be the best. And even those early supporters like Chris Christie and Rudy Giuliani have both gone by the wayside very early on.
Okay, I want to ask about real quickly 3 other nominations which are very controversial. You've got Jeff Sessions for Attorney General, who has in the past made racial remarks. He's got the former Attorney General of Oklahoma for Environment, a guy who's suing EPA. He is an environmental doubter. And he's got former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who in 2012 said he would eliminate the Energy Department as Secretary of Energy.
And you can add to this education, somebody who doesn't support public education. You can add to that commerce and labor. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think we are going to see, to me, these are traditional Republican picks of really, really, really trying to shrink the size and scope of the federal government. I think we're going to see them make great efforts towards that.
Always listen to what people say, because what they say tells you what they're going to do, and then watch the hands. The mouth talks. The mouth has appointed these people, doing exactly what he said he would do or intending to do. Now watch the hands and see if they do it.
I think it shows the dominance of Pence and his folks on the transition. I think really what you're getting is a guy who kind of campaigned, is drain the swamp, but at the end of the day, you have to look around. Whoever you pick, they have to be from Washington and of Washington, because if you pick an outsider, it's going to take them a year.
Let me ask you, what should we, from your view, expect of President Trump in his first 100 days?
He's going to stumble. I think he's going to have a rough start, but like any president, he's going to settle into the job and he's going to figure it out. Barack Obama had a terrible first term, in my opinion, but figured out how to be president in the 6th, 7th, and 8th year. I think Trump's going to have a rough start. By the way, if I was advising anybody, I'd say, look, don't go in round 1. Go in round 2. Let him figure it out first. I think it's going to be tough first year. But he'll figure it out the way everybody else figured it out.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think also you'll see the infrastructure bill move more quickly, or at least try to move it. That is his signature mark. He has to keep his constituency together by saying, look, I'm doing this, or look, they're stopping me from doing it. I need you to help me. And then you'll see the internet get crazy. That's really what this is about.
I don't think we have much of a honeymoon in the presidency anymore, and I don't think Trump is going to have one. I don't think Barack Obama had one. I think he's going to do what most presidents have to do. He's going to resort to using executive orders to get things done, because even though he has a Republican Congress, it's going to be hard to push big bills through early on. And if you want to be successful, you've got to strike early while the iron is hot. And I think it's going to be tough for him to get something like immigration moving.
One of the first orders of business, he's got to appoint a Supreme Court justice.
Yep.
Yes. No easy task.
Second order of business? Is he going to put up that wall?
Infrastructure bill, get people working. Get his constituency, the people that elected him, to believe that he's actually going to do something.
He
And
needs a
tax
win.
cuts.
He needs a win. So whatever you do is, when you're looking at the list, go for the lowest hanging fruit that you know Congress is going to give to you.
Okay, Jonathan Greenspun, Hank Schonkoff, Jeannie Zainel, always a pleasure to have you here and get your insight, and we'll look forward to what's ahead under President Donald Trump. Have a great holiday.
You too.
We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we'll talk about the rise in the federal interest rate and how it's going to affect you in your pocketbook. We'll be right back. For just the second time in the last 10 years, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates. The 0.25% increase has long been anticipated. It comes at a time that the economy has shown steady improvement, as we hear in this report from Karen Kaifa.
The U.S. economy has added jobs for 74 consecutive months, and the November jobs report showed unemployment at 4.6%, the lowest level since 2007. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen said the move can be interpreted as the board's vote of confidence in the economy.
Our decision to raise rates should certainly be understood as a reflection of the confidence we have in the progress the economy has made, and our judgment that that progress will continue.
The Fed indicated rates could take up at a faster pace next year, perhaps 3 or more rate hikes in 2017. So what does this all mean to you? On the upside, higher interest rates mean good news for savers. After years of earning next to nothing on money in the bank, interest on deposits is going to tick up. Slowly, but still something. On the flip side, higher interest rates mean more expensive borrowing. That includes car loans and credit card debt and mortgages, though with such a small increase, the numbers won't really skyrocket.
And our thanks to Karen Kaifa for that report. So what does it all mean? We began to hear that from Karen about the impact of the race, but we'll hear in more detail from our guest, Robert Brusca. He's the chief economist of Fact and Opinion, a firm which he founded here in Manhattan. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Let's amplify what Karen was telling us.
Sure.
How is it going to hit us in our pockets?
Well, a couple of different ways. We're going to have higher interest rates. We see that from the Federal Reserve. But also the economy looks like it's doing better. And economists right now are putting their forecasts up a little bit, slightly, for next year. Not dramatically. Not as dramatically as markets have moved up. And that's because markets are reacting to a couple of different things, right? We have these Trump proposals. We don't know exactly which ones he'll push through and what form they'll be. You know, presidents always propose this, but they pass that. So the question is, what is Trump going to get through? He's talking about tax cuts, big tax cuts for corporations. Of course, that alone could push the stock market up a lot higher, even if growth isn't that much higher. So understand, when you're looking at the stock market have an outsized reaction, it doesn't necessarily tell you the growth is going to be that much stronger. But between tax cutting and cutting back on regulations in business and across the economy, you could see the business environment change quite a lot.
But talking about business environment and dealing internationally, you got the possibility here of trade wars with what Donald Trump is talking about the trade agreements we have with the foreign powers.
Yeah, well, this is a place where you have to walk carefully. But if you don't stick up for your interests, you won't have any. You know, you take a look at the UK and Brexit, right? Sticking up for itself, and now it has a difficult situation to untangle. The United States basically in that same mold, saying that, we want to reformulate some of our trade agreements. And actually, Mexico has said it's willing to talk about, renegotiations on NAFTA. So that's going to happen. With China, Trump has had a more belligerent tone. And just today, there's news of China taking some retaliatory action against automakers operating in China. And so China's very sensitive to this, and particularly Mr. Trump's suggestion that he might want to horse trade the United States' position on Taiwan for other things that China's doing. And of course, China has grabbed the South China Sea, even though the World Court has said they have no right to it. And so, for the first time, the United States really seems to be sort of staking out its territory a little bit more, saying, no, these are U.S. interests. We're not just going to roll over and give this to you. And so for the U.S. and China, there will be confrontation.
Robert, let's get back to right now. It's a 0.25% increase. So it's only 0.25%, but they're talking about possibility of even 3 more increases in the new year. That'll bring it up, but still everything's relative, because back in the 80s, I believe it was, we had a 10% interest rate.
Oh, yes.
So what should people do? What guidance would you offer people who are so concerned right now? Well, how is this going to affect me? If you're going to buy a house, you're going to buy a car, do it this week, next week, or does it not make any difference?
Well, fortunately, I'm an economist. I have to say I saw this coming. I've already refied my mortgage, but it's not too late to do that. You can still get in while the interest rates are low. Interest rates are going to be headed up. So if you haven't taken a look at that, and if you're able to do it, you might want to look at refinancing your mortgage. It could mean that house purchases are going to be a little bit stronger over the next couple of months as people look at these low rates as, the last of the legacy of the low interest rate era, and come in to buy things early. The Home Builders Index has just reported a very, very big gain. And we may be seeing the evidence that people are doing this. They're beginning to strike where rates are still low. Buy that house they've been tinkering with, deciding this is the time to pull the trigger and to make that purchase. But beyond that, it's really a question of how much growth the economy actually is able to amass, because you can talk about tax cutting and you can talk about all these other things, but at the end of the day, we have the same economic environment, we have a weak global environment, and Donald Trump will not be able to work any magic. He can cut some taxes, he can cut some regulations, but we still have a very disenchanted labor force out there. And despite the fact that people talk about how the unemployment rate is low and the economy is doing well, there were all these dissatisfied people who elected Donald Trump because they didn't see things that way. So when you see the economic data, you got to remember that there's another truth to these data. The data tell you a statistical story of the U.S. economy told in a particular way. And it's not exactly the way all the Americans are experiencing it. There are people who are not unemployed, but who are not working and who don't have jobs and who are left out. And these are the people who are marginalized and who can make a big difference in how the economy performs.
Right now, there's so much uncertainty as to what impact Trump's policies will have on our economy. What does that say to the investor who's involved in financial institutions or the stock market? Is it a good time to stay there, pull out your investments, or what would you advise?
Well, the stock market has run up. It's pretty strong, but
is it going to pull back?
Well, everything pulls back, but I think it's going to continue to move forward. I think there are other things to look forward to. One of the things that Trump has talked about is giving firms an opportunity to bring money back they have overseas. Companies have a lot of money overseas. And in the short run, when they bring money back, there's not going to be much to do with it except to share buybacks. And that tends to support stock prices. So I think that's one very technical thing for the market that will support it, that's hanging out there, that's a very positive fundamental. Apart from that, you've got tax cuts, you've got regulations, you have other positive things for the stock market still in the mix.
So right now, things are looking positive at this moment for the new year, going forward.
Positively.
Uncertain, but positive. Robert Brusca, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Have a great holiday. And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/news closeup. And special holiday programs will be replacing this broadcast on Christmas and New Year's Day. So at this time, all of us here involved with Pix 11 News Closeup wish all of you the most joyous of holidays and Happy New Year. And on a personal note, would like to wish well to Ellen Marks, who has been our brilliant producer of this program since its inception. She is now moving on, and we are going to miss her. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.